started. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available online later today. And so you'll have a chance to listen to it again if you missed anything now. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining our webinar. I expect a few more people will trickle into the webinar room as we go. But let me just introduce myself. My name is Ashley from Mobility International USA. I'm going to be discussing how people with disabilities can find funding to come to the United States for international exchange, and that's me. And first I'd like to ask, for those who are in the room already, where are you coming from? Which country do you live in? Just type in the chat box, and we'll take a look and see where people come from. I come from Eugene, Oregon, which is on the west coast of the United States, just above California. That's where Mayusa is located. Oh, excellent. We have someone from Canada, someone from Spain, someone from Russia. That is wonderful. Well, for those of you who are new to Mayusa, we are a nonprofit organization, and we promote the rights of people with disabilities around the world through international exchange. A lot of you will be familiar with Mayusa's short-term exchange programs, but we can also help answer questions that people with disabilities have about doing international exchange programs through other organizations too. We are a free information resource, and we can share tips on how people with disabilities can be included in international exchange. People with many different types of disabilities from around the world can contact us, and they do contact us with lots of questions. And a very popular question is, how do I find financial aid and funding to do an exchange in the United States? I just want to clarify, Mayusa does not provide funding or any kind of scholarships, but we do share information on where you can find funding from other sources. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Our information service is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about them later. So on this slide, I ask, what will bring you to the United States? And some of you might have seen this poll when you entered the webinar room. It says, what do you want to do in the U.S.? Study at a high school, study at a college or university, take an English or ESL course, get professional experience, or something else? And if you chose something else, feel free to explain in the chat window. So these are all very popular types of international exchange to come to the United States. All right, I'll show you the results here so you can see. Someone chose they want to study at a college or university. It's very common. Someone said other, so we might have to wait and see what that person wants to do. But really, there are tons of options for people with and without disabilities to come to the United States. A lot of people wonder, but isn't it expensive? Many people do international exchange in order to reach their educational or professional goals in a new country. And then they'll later return to their home country with some new skills. And although there are a lot of benefits of international exchange, the expenses related to it can be overwhelming sometimes. So it might include things like tuition and program fees, health insurance, passports and visas. You have to find housing, air travel to get to the United States and back home, as well as other expenses can really add up. And also, some people with disabilities might require accommodations or services that sometimes have costs associated with them. For example, wages for a personal care assistant, or or other similar disability-related accommodations. And although, there are a lot of expenses, people with disabilities do find ways to help cover them. And this brings us to our first funding fact, which is some international exchange programs include full or partial funding for costs like tuition, housing, health insurance, and/or airfare. These are called sponsored programs or funded programs. Sometimes people call them fellowships. And there are a lot of institutions and organizations that offer these sponsored programs and fellowships. You might have heard of things like Fulbright, which is through the U.S. Department of State. This is the same institution that sponsors our project here at MIUSA that I mentioned earlier. It also offers several sponsored exchange opportunities for students of all levels, professionals, teachers, and others. So what I was going to do, I'd like to share some examples of some sponsored programs. And if any of them interest you, I really encourage you to learn more about them and apply. Just to clarify, these programs are not through MIUSA, but they're through an outside organization. However, we really strongly encourage people with disabilities to learn more about sponsored programs, and so hopefully that they will apply for them and participate in them. Now, no one in the poll said that they're interested in studying at a U.S. High school in the U.S., but I just want to briefly mention that it is possible for high school students with disabilities to come on exchange to the United States, and there are even scholarship programs that help sponsor the costs for them. So if you know any young people in your country who have disabilities, encourage them to think about applying for a school year in the United States. Programs such as the Future Leaders Exchange, the FLEX program, and the Kennedy Lugar Youth Exchange and Study, or the YES program, plus the Youth Leadership Program and Rotary Youth Exchanges, they all involve living with an American host family and attending an American high school for up to a year. And many students with and without disabilities have done these programs and have had life-changing experiences abroad. I've included a photo of one such student who is deaf, who is also from Malaysia and participated in the YES program. So she got to live with an American host family and go to a school for a whole year. And then she later returned to Malaysia. So these scholarships might cover costs related to round-trip airfare from the home country to the U.S., plus sometimes health insurance, and includes the placement with a U.S. host family and some other expenses. However, not all expenses are covered. Participants are still responsible for things like obtaining their own passport or getting any required medical examinations, extra pocket money, etc. Each of those programs has different eligibility requirements, and such as which countries are eligible, ages. Most of the programs are for students who are teenagers in their high school years. So if any of these programs are interesting, just make sure to understand the eligibility requirements. In addition, all of these programs specifically encourage people with disabilities to apply. So although there are a lot of people who don't have disabilities on these programs, they want more people with disabilities to get involved. And that's where we hope that you will help with that. So in addition to sponsored programs for high school students, there are also sponsored programs for undergraduate students as well. And one person did say they're interested in studying at a college or university. That tends to be a very popular request that we get at MIUSA is people want to come to the US to study, either undergraduate or graduate, and they want to know what kinds of funding is available. And they're usually asking about scholarships, which we'll get to later, but it's also good to know that there are some sponsored programs that you might be able to apply for, depending on which country you're from and other eligibility requirements that can help bring you to the US for a year or even longer sometimes. Two programs that you should check out include the Global Undergraduate Exchange Program. This provides a semester or academic year scholarship to do undergraduate study, and it's for people who are from Asia, Eurasia, and the Western Hemisphere. So if you're from those regions, definitely look up that program and see if you're eligible. The other program is the Community College Initiative Program, which invites people to the United States for up to a year to study at a community college. And this is for people who are from countries such as Brazil, Cameroon, Costa Rica, Egypt. I won't name them all, but just to give you an idea, you might be eligible. I've included a photo of someone who participated in the community college program named Muzaffar. He has cerebral palsy and is from Pakistan and studied at a community college in the United States. For graduate students, there are also similar programs. Oops, oh, just one moment, sorry. We're going to give the captioner a chance to reconnect. One moment. Okay. All right, Heidi, I just made you a host. Let me know when that's ready. We're going to pause for just a moment while we get the captions back on. For those of us who are just joining us, participants are typing which country they're from in the chat window. We've had people from Vietnam, Canada, Spain, and then you may also participate in our poll of what do you want to do in the United States. Ines asked, can we have the PowerPoint after this presentation? And yes, this webinar is being recorded, and we will upload it at the end of the day. Just a few more minutes. Okay, looks like we're back online with the captioning pod. So we're going to go ahead and continue. Thanks for letting me know. So we're going to continue with sponsored programs for graduate students. Programs such as Fulbright, which I mentioned earlier, offers a program for foreign students, including graduate students, young professionals, and artists from all over the world to do research and study in the United States for 1 year or even longer at U.S. universities. Many people with and without disabilities have participated in Fulbright, including Adriana, who is pictured on this slide. Adriana comes from Colombia and is blind, and she is a Fulbright student who is currently in the United States, in Texas, in fact. Another graduate program that's funded is the Edmund Muskie Graduate Fellowship Program, and this is for master's degree level study for people from Eurasia. So that would probably include like Russia and countries near there. And it's available for study in the United States. Another example is the Rotary Peace Fellowship. This is actually for 2 years of master's level degree, master's level study rather, for people who are interested in peace studies, conflict resolution, and international relations. They have 7 centers where people can study, but only one of these is located in the United States. So if you're interested in peace studies, consider Rotary Fellowship. And that one covers tuition, fees, transportation, and many other expenses. Again, both the U.S. Department of State and Rotary encourage people with disabilities to apply for these programs. So don't hesitate to get started in your research if you're thinking that study in the U.S. is something that you want to do. Now, not everyone is in school. Some people are working professionals. They might be scholars or teachers, people working in different fields, and there are many sponsored opportunities for professionals as well, including the Humphrey Fellowship Program, which is 10 months of non-degree graduate level study in the United States for mid-level professionals. One example is Samson, who's pictured here from Malawi. Samson has an amputated limb and participated in the Humphrey Fellowship Program. He is involved in civil society in his home country of Malawi, so he did a study program in California for 10 months to learn more about civil society and to improve his work back home. Fulbright, I mentioned earlier, has programs for graduate students, but it also has programs for visiting scholars, and actually awards 850 grants to foreign scholars from over 100 countries to do postdoctoral research in the United States. So if anyone is at that level, make sure to check that out. And we will also be conducting a webinar on that topic later this month as well. So if anyone is interested, please let me know, and I can share the link later on. Other examples of sponsored programs for professionals that I wanted to share include the Community Solutions Program. This is a great professional development program for people who were working in things like environmental issues, women's issues, conflict resolution. And it places people from around the world at a local organization in the United States where the participant does a fellowship or an internship. And there they gain some leadership skills. And that program includes visa support, round-trip travel, health insurance, housing, and more. People with disabilities are strongly encouraged to apply. And actually, I've included yet another participant with a disability. This is Angela, who's pictured from Peru. Angela is blind and is very interested in making life better for people who are blind in Peru. So when she applied for the Community Solutions Program, they placed her at a U.S. organization that works with people who are blind. So she was able to learn and then also to share her knowledge with them as well. Finally, Atlas Service Corps. I just wanted to mention that really quick as well. It's for people who are working in nonprofit around the world. So it's a fellowship program that includes health insurance and training and a living stipend for 12 to 18 months. So of these sponsored programs that I've mentioned, do any of them stand out to you? Do any of them seem like something that you might apply for? If so, if you want to learn about, if you want to learn more information about any of the sponsored programs that I mentioned, or if you want to, if maybe none of them sounded very interesting, but you still want to find something else, you will be able to find more information on these pages. The U.S. Department of State Exchange's website has a really helpful search engine where you can say which country you're from and what kind of exchange you want to do, and it'll tell you what kinds of programs, sponsored programs, you might be eligible for. You can also contact the U.S. Embassy in your country. Most of the U.S. embassies have a website with information about educational or professional exchange programs. And then finally, on MyUSA's website, we include a list of all of the fellowships and sponsored programs that I just mentioned. And I will include those URLs in my email later today so that you will have access to them. So let's move on to funding fact number 2. So that is US-based scholarships, employers, and financial aid offices may not discriminate on the basis of disability. In fact, many scholarships and funded programs encourage people from diverse backgrounds to apply, and this includes disability. So why do I mention this? Well, it's because a lot of people ask, I have a disability, so what kinds of funding can I apply for? And the answer is, well, you can really apply for the same kind of funding that people without disabilities can apply for. So we want to make sure that people are aware that disability is often thought of as part of diversity, which is something that is very valued in America. So it can sometimes help when you're applying for scholarships or programs. The U.S. Department of State, which sponsors a lot of the programs that I mentioned earlier, has a commitment to diversity, in fact, and their statement reads, "The Bureau seeks and encourages the involvement of people from traditionally underrepresented audiences in all of its programs. Opportunities are open to people regardless of their disability, whether physical or mental. The Bureau is committed to fairness and inclusion." So whether your disability is related to mobility, or it's a hearing or vision disability, or maybe it's a disability that people can't see, perhaps a learning disability or a mental health related disability, it doesn't matter. If you're eligible in the other ways, then you should still consider applying. In fact, you should definitely consider applying for a sponsored program or other kinds of scholarships. Now, there are a few disability organizations in the U.S. that offer scholarships specifically for students with disabilities. I've listed a few examples here. 1-800-wheelchair.com, Alexander Graham Bell, Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic, and Spina Bifida Association of America. But when searching for other organizations, make sure to look at the eligibility very carefully, and especially to check that non-US citizens can apply. Sometimes, although an organization might award a scholarship for people with disabilities, it might sometimes be specific for Americans with disabilities if you're asking an American organization, but not always. So just make sure to check. And again, don't limit yourself to applying for only disability scholarships. You should apply for the same kinds of scholarships that people without disabilities apply for too. Here are a few examples. Opportunity grants are small grants to support international students who might need financial assistance to take the next steps towards study in the United States. So these grants, they're actually not scholarships to help pay for your tuition in the United States, but rather they're to help pay for all the things, all the costs related to just to apply for a school in the United States. For example, you might have to take a placement test for your English or for SATs or GRE scores. To take those tests usually has a fee, and so this opportunity grant can help pay for that. There are sometimes schools charge a fee just to apply for the school, and you will also need to apply for a visa, which can also be costly. So these opportunity grants are really helpful. Not all countries award opportunity grants, but many do. The way to find out is to contact an Education USA center in your country. These are centers that help provide information about applying for study at a United States college or university, or sometimes even English programs. And if that's something that you're thinking about doing, then I would definitely encourage you to take the first step and check out Education USA. They also offer several webinars on topics such as funding, how to choose a school, and other topics. Next, I listed the American Association of University Women International Fellowships. So besides disability-specific scholarships, think about what else makes you unique. So there are many scholarships for women. There are scholarships for people from certain countries. There are scholarships for people who want to study a certain field, like, for example, geography or public health. So definitely branch out and get creative. This international fellowship that I included here is for women who are full-time graduate students. Another scholarship for women is this Margaret McNamara Memorial Fund Scholarship, which is for women who are from developing countries. Now this one you already have to be in the United States studying at an institution, but that's another good point, is that even when you're in the US, maybe you've got your scholarships, you've arrived in the United States, you're studying at a school, it's always still a good idea to keep an eye out for other scholarships for unexpected expenses. Now, scholarships and grants are not the only types of financial aid. There are also loans. I've included an example called the Roe Fund, which provides private loans for people who are from Latin America in order to study in the United States. So if any of those sound interesting, you can look them up, and I'll show you how in just a moment. But first, I wanted to just remind you, a scholarship is money that you do not need to pay back. It's a gift to be used towards tuition, and it might be based on financial need, or it might be based on merit. In other words, things like good grades, how involved you are in activities, etc. A grant is also money that you do not need to pay back. Sometimes scholarships and grants are words that are used in place of each other, but they're similar. Grants are based on financial need. A loan, however, is money that you must pay back, usually after completing an academic program. People receive loans based on their financial need. So, where should you go to search for financial aid? Education USA Advising Center, which you remember just a moment ago, I explained there are centers all over the world. Sometimes There might be more than one center in your country. www.educationusa.info is where you want to go, and you'll be able to search for centers in your country. They can provide information about financial aid, scholarships, and more, and those opportunity grants that I mentioned as well. Also, make sure to think about any international organizations or clubs, private organizations that sometimes have chapters in different countries around the world. These organizations include things like Kiwanis, the Lions Club, Rotary, which, like I mentioned earlier, sponsors different kinds of exchange programs. You can also contact the Ministry of Education in your country to find out if they award any scholarships. Disability organizations in your country. Not all disability organizations award scholarships, but it's still a good place to try. And then finally, scholarship search. You can search for scholarships using online search engines, and there are many out there. It's helpful because you can search for scholarships specifically for international students sometimes, or other criteria. And we list many of those search engines on our website, which I've provided a link, and I will share that in an email later on. So there is yet another excellent financial aid resource for U.S. study that I haven't mentioned yet. And of course, the U.S. college or university that you plan to attend can sometimes provide not just scholarships, but many different types of institutional aid, which could include grants, scholarships, loans, graduate teaching fellowships, work study, and more. And I've included a tip here. You can see which U.S. schools currently offer financial aid for international students at Education USA's financial aid page, which is really helpful. If you were to click on that link, which again I will share later, you'd be able to see a list of different colleges and universities, and it would say how much money that a scholarship would award to an international student. Now, if you don't see your favorite school on this list, it doesn't mean that that school doesn't have any financial aid, but you should visit the school's website and contact an admissions counselor at that school to find out for sure. All right, now I'm going to save some time for questions in just a bit, but first I want to share about, so once you've received scholarships or other kinds of financial aid to help pay for things like tuition, student expenses or exchange participant expenses. For people with disabilities who require, some services or technology or products, sometimes those are associated with a cost as well. So sometimes you'll need to ask yourself, well, how will I be able to receive those services while I'm in the United States? And if they have a cost related to them, who will help fund them? So the first thing that you should know is that U.S. programs must provide reasonable accommodations if needed. And these are, by if needed, I mean needed to access things like classrooms, workspaces, site visits, housing, or other aspects of the program. What is a reasonable accommodation? It might include things like sign language interpreters, converting print materials to an electronic format or to Braille. It could be wheelchair access into housing or a workspace or other place. Um, However, some accommodations are considered personal and might be the responsibility of the participant, such as personal care attendants, wheelchairs, personal electronic equipment, etc. Um, Again, the participant is usually responsible for these types of personal aids or services. Um, but if you have trouble with funding for those, then MIUSA might be able to make some suggestions as well. And it might be possible to help to negotiate with your exchange program in some cases. Now the trick is you should always request disability-related accommodations soon after you are accepted to the program or school. You don't want to wait till the last minute, but there is a risk that by telling someone what kinds of disability-related accommodations you need, it's fine to ask, but legally they're not allowed to discriminate someone based on any accommodations that they will need. It's usually best to wait until after you are accepted to the program to make your requests. And sometimes there is a procedure that you will have to follow in order to receive them, so make sure to follow it carefully. If you're planning to come to the United States for study, it's helpful to know that most schools, colleges, and universities in the United States will provide disability-related information and accommodations for students at no charge. It's usually included in the tuition or student fees, so there are no extra fees to receive disability-related services at school. However, if you're not coming to the United States as a student, say you're coming as on a professional program, or you're doing another kind of exchange program, like an internship, then the program might not necessarily have a disability-related service center or office, and instead you might need to find disability-related resources, including counseling resources, in the host community. These will usually be provided by an independent living center or a disability organization in the host community. And we have more information about this on MIUSA's webpage. I've included a link here, but I will also paste that to your email as well. So another good way to keep up with opportunities for international exchange to the United States, including funded opportunities and scholarships and other exchange programs, is to stay updated with MIUSA on its e-newsletter. We send out a monthly e-newsletter. If you are on Facebook, how many people are on Facebook? Like us on our page, and we often post a lot of scholarship announcements that we hear about from other organizations there. Some people who are on Twitter can find us at @mobilityintl and see the latest updates there as well. You can also visit us online. As many of you probably visited our website, you'll see that we have a page on coming to the United States where you can learn about your disability-related laws, services, and culture in the United States. You can find links to all the funding pages that I mentioned. Plus, you can read a bunch of stories about people with disabilities who had an exchange experience in the US, kind of like the people that I mentioned in this webinar. And of course, you can always ask us questions. Our email address for asking questions is clearinghouse@miusa.org. And I will type that in the chat box as well. So you can always email us with questions about participating in international exchange with a disability. And it doesn't have to be a question about scholarships or funding, although that's certainly fine. If you have a question about, you know, getting health insurance while you're an exchange participant, or maybe you are deaf and require a sign language interpreter, how will that go? We can share some information about that. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. However, I'd like to open it up to questions right now. We have about 15 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type in the chat box. And I will do my best to answer them. And while people are doing that, I will take another look at the poll that people submitted as more people enter the webinar on what they want to do while they're in the United States. Looks like most people are interested in studying at a college or university, or they have other plans. And then one person wants to get professional experience. So that's really great. And of course, we love to hear stories and share experiences from people with disabilities who have come to the United States. They come from all over the world. They have diverse disability types, and they each have very unique experiences, come from different fields. Some are professionals, some are teachers, some are students, some are artists. Looks like a few people are in the process of asking a question. And let me know if you need me to repeat anything, or if you need me to go back to a slide that you wanted to see again. I'm going back and reading some of the other countries where people are from. Someone is from Cyprus, the United Kingdom, Nigeria. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming from all around the world to be in this webinar today. Elena's asking, Ashley, you mentioned about a webinar on Fulbright Visiting Scholar Program. Could you please share a link? Yes, I will be happy to do that. This is going to be a webinar at the end of the month. Fulbright will be producing the webinar, but a representative from MIUSA will be guest presenting to explain how people with disabilities should apply for the Fulbright Visiting Scholar Program. Let me take just a moment to find the link. Well, Elena, just give me just a moment, and I will paste that URL in the chat box a little later. Let me take a look at a few other questions. Ogechi, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is asking, let's see, is there any way of finding out universities are better at supporting students with learning disabilities? Oh, that's a question. Yes, well, you might be aware that all universities and colleges are a potential match for a student with a disability and can offer services. or accommodations, some students might prefer colleges or schools that have more experience um, working with students with learning disabilities and providing services with for students with a specific disability. Yeah, there is a way. Um, one way might just be to, uh, you know, I always find it helpful to check out Google and um, and ask what other people's opinions are. However, there is a list that I remember seeing um, that had programs specifically designed for students with learning disabilities. Um, there's also a college in the United States called Landmark, um, which is exclusively for students with learning disabilities. Um, so that might be something interesting to check out. However, a lot of colleges and universities will offer a disability service program as well as an academic learning center, for example, that might provide tutors um, or assistive technology to help students with learning disabilities um, follow along in class or take notes um, or be organized. And I can definitely give you more information that possibly through email. So please get in touch with me and I'd be happy to share more. Um, okay, let's see, we have another question. I am a graduate student in political science. My research subject is the interaction between disability community and the U.S. Congress, and I am planning to do some kind of a research internship to collect my data. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, many people with disabilities, like I said, they're interested in all types of fields, um, including political science, social science, the arts, uh, um, the hard sciences, medicine, languages, all kinds of fields. But however, there are some people with disabilities who are interested in doing research study about disability. Um, and some schools will offer uh, programs related to that. One of the university and college uh, search engines that I mentioned earlier, there's sometimes a way where you can search by major, determine if a school has the major that you want. And so a good way that you can do that is to check out one of those search engines and see if there's a disability studies um, major to choose from, and that might turn up results for any institution that has disability-related um, program. Let's see. Chris's first step would be to find an organization to receive you. What would be the best strategy to find it? Oh, okay, I see. So it sounds like Chris is looking to do be placed at an organization related to disability, or maybe not even disability related. It could be any organization where he could study disability. And you know how to find an organization. That's a great question. On MyUSA's website, we have a database, and I will enter the URL here, www.myusa.org/orgsearch. And this is a database of disability organizations around the United States and around the world. So one way, if you're looking to be placed at a disability organization, might be to contact a few of them that are in that database. Of course, not every organization will be in that database. Um, so another good way is to network through, um, you can learn about other disability organizations through MyUSA on our Facebook or e-news, our Twitter. Twitter is a great way to network with disability organizations. Um, keep in mind that if you do find an organization where you want to work or do an internship or conduct your research, you might need to have a visa in order to do that. So if you're already coming to the United States as a graduate student, then that shouldn't be a problem. If you are coming solely to conduct research or to do an internship, you need to check with the organization to find out what if they can sponsor your visa. If they are unable to, then there are some third-party programs that can help you obtain a visa, for example, a J-1 visa, in order to do an internship or a professional position such as that. And I can certainly help you by suggesting some additional ways. Let's see. So we have about 5 more minutes. Are there any other questions? So Chris, contact me via email and I will share a few more specific links and pages with you that might be helpful. Oh, that's fantastic. You're thinking about reaching out to organizations such as AAPD, UCP, which is United Cerebral Palsy, or NCIL, which is I mentioned independent living centers earlier. This is the National Network of Independent Living Centers. What's really exciting is that there are disability organizations who are becoming more interested in international exchange, and some of them are hosting people with disabilities who come from other countries. Let me go back to my first slide here, my title slide. And I don't know if you can see the photo, but I have a photo here of a woman. Her name is Sefakor, actually. She comes from Ghana. She uses a wheelchair, and she came to the United States to study for a graduate program, which also included a component to do an internship. For independent living, you might be able to see that sign. Involved in independent living and disability rights right there in her host community in the in fact did her really enjoyed it. Something that you could here's the email reach me at, and again There are many people working at MIUSA who can help answer questions. Michelle, Ashley, Olivia, Cerise. Um, so there will usually will always be available. Someone will always be available to help answer your questions. um, well, I'm really excited that to see so many people from around the world in this webinar today. Some of you must be up at a pretty strange hour in your day, and I really appreciate that. You might have more questions later, and that's fine. Just direct them to us. And once again, this webinar is being recorded, and I'll make sure that the recording is made available to you, as well as some of the URLs to the links that I mentioned. Any other final questions? Or comments? Anybody inspired to come to the United States for international exchange? All right, well, stay in touch and keep us updated during your process. There are many steps involved in doing an international exchange, and we can definitely provide assistance or advice along the way. I want to say thank you so much, everyone. Looks like a couple of people are typing, so I'll give them a chance in case they have a question. I hope this was helpful in showing you how many, the variety of opportunities in international exchange, and also the diversity of people who participate in exchange. Diversity in countries, in fields, ages, and also diversity in disability. Thank you again.